And believe it or not, there's more. If you measure the Huangpu River bank to bank, it's 400 meters wide. But our two pilots know they're working with a lot less.
The navigable waterway, the waterway that's deep enough, is fewer than 300 meters wide. In some places, it's only a bit more than 200 meters.
And that worries Shanghai pilots, because a moving ship needs a distance 3 to 5 times its length to turn around. To avoid a collision, a 100-meter-long ship will need 300 to 500 meters. And on the Huangpu, it isn't going to get it.
For instance, the ship we're on today is 145 meters long. So when it comes into the river, it can't turn itself around. And ships don't have brakes like cars do. If you slow a ship down to avoid a collision, you can't steer it. It would just drift out of control. So if there is an emergency, there is nothing I can do.
That's why everybody's glad when the tugboats finally take over and push the ship into the dock. Because to these guys, a cruise up the Huangpu is about as relaxing as steering a runaway truck through a crowded shopping mall. Shanghai's navigational challenges make life interesting for Wu Zhanwen and Jiang Wei. But why should they be a big problem for Shanghai? After all, Shanghai's been a world-class port for decades. All that time, the Yangtze was choking with silt. And the Huangpu was never much wider. So what's changed? This has. The size of the ships sailing into Shanghai. Gigantic container ships. The most cost-effective way to move enormous quantities of freight around the planet. If they can't get their cargoes in and out of Shanghai, Shanghai can't give the world what it needs. Ships will go elsewhere, and Shanghai will be left behind. After World War II, shipping containers revolutionized the cargo industry. Unlike loose cargo, packed containers could simply be offloaded onto waiting trucks and driven away. The first ships carried only a few dozen containers. It didn't take a shipping genius to realize that the more containers one ship could carry per voyage, the more money ship owners would make. So container ships got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, if you're making $1,000 per container that you're hauling across the ocean, it's a dollar and cents type of equation. The bigger ships that you can build, the more cargo that you can carry.
In the 1990s, Shanghai built new container ports at Waigaoqiao on the ocean just beyond the mouth of the Yangtze. Ships docking at Waigaoqiao didn't have to sail up the Huangpu, and the water there was over 12 meters deep. For a time, things seemed fine, but then the ships got even bigger. As big as the Gudrun Maersk. Over 40 meters wide, over 300 meters long, longer than the Eiffel Tower, and needing deeper water than Waigaoqiao could offer.
Even at 12.5 meters, that's not really deep enough for the biggest ships. We're talking 9,000, 10,000, 13,000 TEU container ships. So you really want something that's at least 15 meters.
Today's megaships, like the Gudrun Maersk, are in a class by themselves. A class called Post-Panamax, because they're too wide to fit through the Panama Canal. And they're also too big for Shanghai. Steering a 350-meter-long vessel up the traffic-choked Huangpu isn't the best idea. And the Huangpu's 400-meter-wide channel isn't much wider than the Gudrun Maersk is long. Turning would be a nightmare. And in the early 1990s, Shanghai gave the world's biggest ships something else to worry about. 2 suspension bridges spanning the Huangpu.
If a big ship came in, it could not pass under the Huangpu Bridge. Only ships of 48 meters tall or under can pass under that bridge.
In the 21st century, 30% of the world's shipping containers were traveling on post-Panamax vessels. And Shanghai still wasn't deep enough, wide enough, or big enough to let those ships come in. Problems competing ports like Hong Kong and Singapore didn't have. As China's economy exploded, everyone wanted a piece of the action.
Shanghai couldn't handle the business, it would have gone elsewhere.
2002, Shanghai's leaders roll the dice on a bold solution. At a place called Yangshan, 32 kilometers offshore, where the water was 15 to 20 meters deep. Today, Yangshan is a large island that can easily accommodate a world-class container port. But when Shanghai's engineers chose it, over 60% of it didn't exist. Yangshan was just what nature made it. A collection of tiny islands with no room for anything but a fishing village. Engineers considered creating flat land by leveling the hills, but decided against destroying Yangshan's natural topography. Instead, they decided to build the world's biggest container port virtually from scratch.
Yangshan Port is this enormous deep water project that was built kind of on a fresh sheet of paper, the biggest possible piece of infrastructure that they could possibly build to stamp Shanghai's kind of dominance over container shipping.
The plan called for a true megastructure, a 20-kilometer quay where 50 ships could dock at one time, and a port that could process 25 million shipping containers in 1 year, 70,000 in just one day. Price tag, an estimated $18 billion. 2002. Construction begins on Yangshan Phase 1. Engineers begin transforming these lonely islets into the world's biggest container port.
It's like trying to tie a butterfly knot in the middle of a raging river. You've got water that's flowing 2 meters a second. These guys are up against typhoon, bad weather, fog,